Yeah, and you know, that's why I say we got to have you back, because I want to talk about that in greater detail in another interview. Who were these Essenes, by the way? Who were these guys?
Yes.
And why were they copying the scriptures?
Yes. You see, until the scrolls were discovered, we in the modern world really only knew one type of Judaism. If you meet Jews today, they may be Orthodox or Reformed, they may be conservative, but all the Jews of today come from the rabbis, the Pharisees. That is a branch of Judaism, and because all Jews we meet today are from that movement, we equate that with Judaism. But now what the scrolls are showing us, back in the days of Jesus Christ, there was not one type of Judaism, but at least three. There were the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Essenes. Now, as you know, the Sadducees died out when the temple was destroyed, and the Essenes also died out when Qumran was destroyed. But now we have the lost library of Jewish libraries we never knew existed. If I may put it this way, if you grew up in the Midwest, in the States, in a Baptist town, and all you ever met were Baptists, and you thought all Baptists are Christians, and one day you travel and you meet Catholics or Protestants or Presbyterians, and you say, well, there are more Christians out there than Baptists. And what the scrolls are showing us is that the Pharisees were strong, but there were others out there too. And it was the Essenes, a group of Jewish men living out in the desert, waiting for the end of the world. They were the ones responsible for putting the scrolls in the caves.
And they were pretty ascetic in their lifestyle, right?
Yes. They lived without women, without wealth. They wrote scrolls, they prayed. I think it's fair to say this was the first monastery in the Western world. Now, let me just add one more thing. There were other Essenes who lived in the cities and the towns who had families and children. But Qumran seems to be the religious headquarters of this monastic group.
And their main focus was assiduously and accurately copying the scriptures.
That was one of their focuses, is to copy the scriptures, read the scriptures, to pray and meditate. But there was another emphasis. They were intensely messianic. In fact, I asked you, Jim, if you go to the scriptures, it says, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. Now, we say that's about John the Baptist. Well, if you go to the scrolls, one of them uses that very quotation. They believed that they were out in the desert preparing the way of the Lord for the Messiah.
Yeah, they were the sons of light.
They were the sons of light. And all the other guys, the other Jews and the Gentiles, were the sons of darkness.
And there's going to be a big apocalyptic end of days.
There would be a great battle at the end of time, the Battle of Armageddon. And did you know what's happening? There is a scroll called the War Scroll that spells out the Battle of Armageddon blow by blow, and it's coming to Canada.
Really?
To be part of the exhibit.
This predates John's apocalypse, which we now know as the book of Revelation.
You see, the glory of the scrolls is that they predate the New Testament. You see, if the scrolls were 100 or 200 AD, then you would get Dan Brown and all these other guys saying, oh, well, the church messed with them. Yeah. We now have independent Jewish evidence that's too early for the Christians and the rabbis to have messed with it.
Let's look at another scroll. This one's called the Daniel Scroll, and this is again, our crew took this yesterday at the RUM. That's how it looks in the the protective cover, glass and atmosphere. Here's how a picture of it looks. Tell us about this.
You know, the book of Daniel, there's a lot of people who discuss the dating of Daniel. Most scholars believe that Daniel reached its final form in the 2nd century BC. That it's sort of underground literature about being faithful to God in times of persecution. There we have a Daniel scroll that's written not 50 years after the original. See, among the scrolls, most Bible books go back hundreds of years before Christ. But Daniel is the one that we have a scroll that's written just a generation later. You see, what all this is showing is that by the time of Jesus Christ, that most of the books of the Old Testament were already done, were already there. And in fact, they were all there except for one, but maybe I'll reveal that in another show.
So when Jesus was in the synagogue there at the sort of the start of his ministry, and he pulled out the Isaiah scroll of 61 and he read it and said, "This, this is about me."
Right.
It was not uncommon for these scrolls to be available to people to read.
Well, even today, if you go to the synagogue, Jews will have scrolls to this day. As you pulled out that scroll, Jesus would have done that in the synagogue. He would open the scroll to the prophet Isaiah, and he read, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me to preach good news to the poor."
Now speaking of Isaiah, Isaiah can be, in fact is, controversial vis-a-vis Jewish perspective and Christian perspective, as it relates to what are called the suffering servant passages that are seen by both sides as messianic. And
isn't that beautiful?
That's gorgeous. That's part of the messianic scroll?
This is the great Isaiah scroll from Cave 1.
Right.
This is the scroll I'm working on now to bring to publication.
Okay. And do we have the Messianic Apocalypse as well? I think we've got that. Let's take a look at that. I mean, I didn't realize that one of these scrolls had Messianic content.
Well, as I said, this was a very Messianic community. They believed not in one but two Messiahs. They believed in a kingly Messiah and they believed in a priestly Messiah. They believed in two. Now, this single scroll you see before you is incredibly important with respect to the gospel and Christian origins. Because what it is, it's a Jewish scroll that is not biblical. It's 1st century BC. It talks about the Messiah, and it talks about a number of things to be expected when the Messiah comes. And we can go into this in another program, but some of the things to be expected is good news will be preached to the poor, recovery of sight to the blind, and the oppressed will go free. Sound familiar?
Yeah, Isaiah 61.
What this means, Jim, what this means is in Luke chapter 4, Jesus is saying loud and clear, "Hello, I'm the Messiah," without saying Messiah.
Right.
You see, in the light of that scroll, what it tends to do is authenticate passages like Luke 4. Let me put it this way. When you see the life of Jesus without the scrolls, it's in black and white. But now the scrolls throw a glorious floodlight onto the picture, and you can see it in technicolor. Ah, that's what Jesus was getting at. He didn't have to say, "I'm the Messiah," because everybody knew.
Yeah. I think we should give you some information here, friends, about this exhibit that's coming up at the ROM. It's starting on Saturday the 27th, goes right through to the 3rd of January 2010. It is a terrific thing that you really need to take into your schedule. And something you need to know, if you log on to the rom.on.ca/scrolls and register for your ticket there and type in Crossroads, you'll actually get a discount, which is a pretty good deal. Yeah. In fact, it would be great for you to do that. It would be interesting for us to know and also the ROM to know. Yeah, and it's also our website too, but it'd be great for us to know just how many of you are going there because you heard about it here. I mean, that would be great. It gives us another little insight into the interactive element of the program.
Jim, can I say something about that, just briefly? You know, all Muslims, once in their life, have to go to Mecca on a pilgrimage. And I think most Jews try to get to Jerusalem. For Christians, if we were to go on a pilgrimage, of course it's to the Holy Land. Here we have the actual documents from the days of Jesus Christ coming to us. I believe strongly that every viewer, if you love the scriptures, if you love Jesus Christ, you need to go and see that exhibit. You will be blessed.
I couldn't agree more. Dr. Peter Flint, thank you so much for coming our way. We've got to have you back, and we will.